Today, many Canadians are aware of the abuses of Indian residential schools. Starting in the 1880s and lasting until 1996, over 150,000 Indigenous children were separated from their parents and placed in 132 federally funded and missionary-run schools. These schools try to kill the Indian in the child in hopes of assimilating Indigenous peoples into Canadian society. But what is lesser known, however, is that in parts of the country, such as British Columbia, schooling was not initially racially segregated. Rather, Indigenous children attended provincial public schools alongside their settler classmates, as can be seen in this class photograph, titled Whites and Indians, Hastings Sawmill School, Vancouver, 1886. And in some locations, Indigenous children continued to attend provincial public schools even after separate residential schools were created. And my PhD research shows that this practice continued well into the 20th century. As British Columbia's public school system was started in the 1870s, new settler communities needed to prove to the provincial government that there were enough children to warrant the opening of a new school. And so some settler parents encouraged Indigenous children to attend to boost numbers. Once in these schools, Indigenous children received a basic English education. However, as in residential schools, Indigenous students often experienced racial discrimination, as they were taught by their teachers to assimilate to the dominant culture. And by the 1890s, some settler parents protested Indigenous children attending public schools. And while the provincial government preferred to follow federal policy that stipulated that Indigenous children attend separate residential schools, provincial officials did not always object to local schools continuing to admit Indigenous students. In fact, as late as 1925, a survey of BC education confirmed that in a number of schools, the children showed, quote, unmistakable signs of Indian blood. Canada's history of colonialism and education, then, is much more complicated than is generally acknowledged. Though residential schools have been rightly criticized as a sad chapter in Canada's history, my research shows that public schools should also be scrutinized as playing a crucial role in the state's efforts to try to kill the Indian in the child and assimilate Indigenous peoples into Canadian society. And what this shows us is that the current truth and reconciliation process to strengthen relations between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in Canada today must also include a rethinking of the relationship between colonialism and Canada's important social institutions, including public schools. Thank you very much.